Roman, thank you for taking the time to visit with me. You've got a lot of amazing information that I think we'll be able to use this to kind of bridge a lot of the understanding between technology and health. And both of us, I think, really appreciate Jack Cruz and a lot of his teachings. And so, if you will, give us that introduction to who you are, and we're going to dive in and talking about some EMF and just overall wellness.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Logan, for the opportunity. And thank you to all your listeners who are consistently empowering themselves, sowing prosperity and health every day. Really appreciate that. I started out as a lover of nature, really, as a scout early on. I was in my aunt's garden for at a very young age, learning a lot of traditional cooking methods with my old Ukrainian grandparents. And as a child, I was always enamored with nature. And then I went into college, and things change, right? Your priorities change. I had a difficult relationship with my stepfather before that. My mother passed away from cancer when I was about 14. So just to back up a bit, both my grandparents passed away from cancer. And fast forward, I'm by myself pretty much now. I'm in college and I'm trying to figure things out. And I see this technology all around us. That's where the money is. So even though I majored in psychology, I'm thinking, okay, well, um, you know, let me go into selling computers because that's where the money is, right? So I started selling computers. I sell computers for about 11 years. And through that course of time, I used the human psychology to help me sell, but I learned how human psychology was being weaponized against itself when people were enamored with this technology. And after I got married, long story short, I moved up to Canada, and now I'm shifting careers. I don't know what I'm going to really do, but on my honeymoon, my wife, she basically has a collapse. We called it a burnout, but basically she was detoxifying from all these SSRIs or antidepressants she was on. And basically, we had to cut the honeymoon short. It turned into a nightmare. And my early months of our marriage was spent trying to figure out what was going on. My wife was basically on the verge, pretty close to suicide. Not, no attempts or anything like that, but it was pretty bad. So, and I found that, okay, well, the only thing that's working is, I was reading even old books from the 1800s saying, get outside, as much light as the patient can bear. And this is in the wintertime in Ontario where, nobody likes to be outside. But credit to my wife, she did it. We went for those early morning walks. Fast forward a little bit more, I stumbled upon Jack Cruz, who and he reaffirmed everything we were doing. So then I found out about the link of Henry Lai of the University of Washington, 1998. He showed how chronic exposure to electromagnetic fields from wireless can cause DNA strand breaks and cancer. And then I was like, wow, okay, I got to do something about this. So that really propelled me down this path, and my wife. And now we call ourselves the power couple because we help people power on with light, power off at night. My wife helped her insomnia, transcend her insomnia with better circadian rhythms and nutrition, and reducing the effect of technology all around us. And that's really what we do now. We help others with their relationship with technology and help their sleep, nutrition, and overall mindset so we can be vital and not let these EMFs steal our energy more than they need to. So that's a little bit about me. And yep, thank you.
Well, awesome. So you've definitely been impacted by cancer as well. That's the whole reason that I'm here. Right, it's my little boy, and just trying to understand cancer, and it's it's a wild world out there, especially with all the information and conflicting, and everybody's got opinions, and uh, everything that appears to be right in my view is completely against medical oncology. So like that's a lot to undertake and try to understand. But you know, Roman, I want to hit on what I believe may be the hidden epidemic that few even talk about, and that's going to be our addiction to technology, addiction to social media, addiction to that blue light. So how do you view that? Am I way off base there, or maybe something?
No, no, for sure. And I'm the first one to admit that I was addicted, and honestly still addicted to a lot, even the screen, right? It's hard when and I mean addicted in a good way, uh, because I use it to create, I use it to write. I'd love to have a typewriter. It's one of my bucket list things, right? But now it's until I'm writing that great American novel, we need to use these screens. And so setting balance. But and that's really where nature comes in, and that's how I help myself, because when I was really addicted in a bad way, I was using it all the time. I was on call with my sales job selling computers. I had the cell phone. I had a computer screen. I was on there late at night looking at all kinds of stuff, right? Playing video games, strategy games, 3 in the morning. It just wasn't good. And then I cross addicted, which usually that happens, right? You know, using alcohol or caffeine while you're doing this, because the blue light spikes your dopamine receptors. And again, thanks to Jack Cruz for bringing this to my attention. But what really helped me in the end, just like when I was a young kid in the garden and a scout, was getting up first thing in the morning, getting and seeing the sunrise. No light at all. Not even flicking on the bathroom light or anything like that. Just resetting that light environment every day really helped me. And I found it's not something that's overnight, right? You got to keep doing it, keep doing it. And after a year, you finally see results. Um, but yeah, so we're all surrounded by these things. What do we do, right? A lot of us are night owls. We're typing up things late at night. Some of us work the night shift. We have very little choice of what we can do. I work with people like that as well. But number one, I think it's all about raising awareness too, because like Jack said, he would have loved to know the risks of, of his night shift work back then. So I think what you're doing is great, because we're empowering people, letting them know that there is such a tremendous health risk to cancer, to diabetes, that this blue light not only spikes your dopamine, it can spike your insulin, which can then cause metabolic failure. But just to simplify things, again, going to the premise of powering on with light, powering off at night. So what do we mean by that? First thing in the morning, first thing I do, thank God that I still have breath in my lungs, that we have a gratitude process, and I go into the shower, cold shower. You don't have to do the cold shower, but within 20 minutes of waking up, my wife and I are on our walk. We're outside, whether it's a cloudy day or not, and yeah, we were listening to the birds. It's very calm. There's very few cars out right now, the LED headlights, because it's like 5:30 in the morning, and that's how we start our day. And one of my best friends, he said, "Well, Roman, why do I need a coach telling me to wake up and get outside? It's so simple." I asked him, a month later, "Well, did you get outside?" No, right? And so there's so many simple things we can do. So that's one thing. So if you have children, or you're a busy executive, or going to work, there's nothing stopping you from getting outside first thing in the morning. Now, you may be different, what they call chronotype. You may be more apt to get up later in the day, but making sure you're consistent is huge. All right, so that's the whole powering on with light aspect. Now, at night, power off at night, right? And that's basically powering off all your devices. Give yourself, I like to give ourselves about a 2 to 3 hour buffer, because that's how long it takes your melatonin to start peaking and start being secreted. Um, so, simplify it. Now, a lot of us, we're on our phones until, right before we go to bed. You can start small, right? Even if it's an hour, right? Or half an hour, just start those habits, right? And it's really as simple as that. So the blue light, though, there's everything has a blue light, right? The button to the blender has a blue light. The button to the monitor, my microphone has a blue light. So there's a lot of things we can do. There's little mechanisms I use, or patches like tape, basically, or getting different appliances. There's the glasses that actually I should have on right now. Yeah, these block about 50% of blue light. And then you can go, more in dense. You can have glasses that block 70 to 90%. But yeah, there's so much to talk about. But just keep it simple, right? Get outside first thing in the morning and then go to bed. We power off the circuit breaker to our bedroom, power off basically almost the whole house other than the refrigerator, because radio frequency from wireless will pair to any live copper wiring in your home, which also amplifies that artificial electrical field. So, and again, that's so basic. You're saving yourself. It's not only free, you're saving yourself money by doing all this stuff, right? And I can tell you, at 44 years old, I feel better now than I did 20 years ago by just doing these simple things.
Yeah. So, Roman, what let's lay out some of the issues that can be directly related to the technology, the EMF exposure, all of the things that are going on with modern life, because I don't think a lot of people realize the correlation. Right? You had mentioned some depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation type things, and I don't think a lot of people realize that these screens that we're using to communicate and do great things have a downside.
Hmm. Um, so you're wondering, sorry, if you could just reframe the question.
Yeah, just let's talk about some of the health consequences that people may not realize are directly related to blue lights, the screens, flicker, all
Gotcha.
of the things we're talking about.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah. So our eyes are very sensitive. They're the gateway to our brain. They're connected directly to our brain, right? So anytime we're in front of this light, EMFs are comprise a lot of things. They're everything from radio frequency to electric fields, magnetic fields. In the end, it's all light. 99.97% of it is invisible. But let's talk about our screens, which is the visible spectrum. Well, that blue light has red light removed from it, most of our screens, and most of it is in the wavelength of about 450, 480 nanometers. Our liver uses an enzyme called cytochrome P450, which peaks at 450 nanometers. They use that in labs to see how the liver functions. They use that blue light. So, what's happening to our liver all the time when we're in front of 450 nanometer light? Coming like these lab rats, right? And so that's what we really need to be aware of, is that this light is not only affecting our eyes, but by affecting our eyes, it affects other organs like our liver, because again, our eyes connect to the brain sends signals to other organs, and that's basically how it works, right? I don't know how it all works. Like, I'm not a brain surgeon, but it's basic understanding, right? So this blue light, it has a lot of other impacts. So when it spikes your dopamine, that reduces your melatonin, right? A lot of us know that the blue light will decrease our melatonin. But a lot of people don't know is it also spikes your dopamine, because melatonin and dopamine have an inverse relationship. This is why melatonin supplements may not be a good idea long term, because the more melatonin you take at night artificially, the lower your dopamine gets. And you need dopamine, right? You need dopamine to have your eye health, because it constricts the skeletal muscle of your pupil. So the more melatonin you take, there's been studies showing partial vision loss in people. So there's this relationship with light, right? So again, how do we get blue light back on track? The sun, that will give us normal levels of melatonin, of dopamine. But to go into other health effects, well, we can talk about obesity and diabetes. Again, blue light will disrupt your insulin receptors by spiking not only your dopamine, it'll mess with your leptin hormone, which is linked right through your eye. And so there's a lot of cascades that can happen when you're exposed to this blue light. Blue light can also increase ADHD, which is your attention, and for some people it can cause anxiety. And anxiety was actually, it's funny aside, but Sigmund Freud invented the term anxiety right when the telegraph was rolled out. And anxiety used to be called neurasthenia, which was a physical disease of the nerves. And where do we keep a lot of the bundles of nerves are in our chest, right? So when we're around these fields of light, it's messing with us on so many levels because we're not used to it, right? So that's why I use a screen filter to filter out these wavelengths. And now blue light by itself, let's just be the devil's advocate, right? Or the angel's advocate, maybe, because blue light can be very good. I recently interviewed a photobiologist out of Germany. His name's Dr. Alexander Wunsch, and he tests certain wavelengths of color on people for color therapy. And blue light can actually heal wounds if used the right way, right? It has a cooling effect. You think about a hot desert, a hot red desert, and then you see that aquamarine or turquoise ocean, right? That's nature signaling, hey, I'm cool, right? You want to get in me when I'm really hot, right? So there are wavelengths that can help us. So it's not that blue is all bad. It's just when it's out of balance, and we're just, we're just not using the balance correctly, and that's why getting back to nature again is the solution.
You had mentioned before we started recording grounding and some of the major misconceptions there. I think a lot of people don't even realize that there's benefits, right? Like we run around as kids barefoot and we think back to the energy and we slept better and all these things, but there's more to it. A lot of the technologies are coming out, the grounding mats. That leads us to what you were talking about on dirty electricity as well. So how do you look at grounding and how do you teach and coach around that topic?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. So when I first got into the EMF arena, learning about energy medicine and some of the studies on our electric circuit and how our bodies pair to the earth, it made sense that we need to be connected to the earth, right? To dump out these electrons, or they're called positive ions, so we can extract in negative ions, which donate to electrical processes in our body to give us energy. That made sense to me on the face of it, right? But not everything is that easy because um, I remember reading the book by Carl Riley. It's called Tracing EMFs in Your Home. And he talks about how the earth is not a sponge, it's a conductor of electricity. And I have to credit Paul Harding of Total EMF Solutions out in Arizona. He really brought this whole grounding thing to my attention because he showed a video. He went out to the middle of the Arizona desert, and he had a Fluke 289 meter, which is a very, very high grade meter that only the military knows how to use. Most EMF consultants don't even use this meter because it's very complex. Put probes in the ground. He drove an hour into the desert, and he found a dirty current. He found this very, very distorted sine wave, and that doesn't belong anywhere in the middle of nature. So the point is that there are these frequencies that are constantly coming through the earth, these wavelengths that can penetrate through the ground very easily, that we're all surrounded with. Okay, well, what do we do, right? Well, there's other, if you can't measure those ground currents in your area, you can go by a body of water. Bodies of water are very good insulators. Usually if there's not any power lines around, that's a good way to ground. But why is this all a problem? Well, because the National Institute for Environmental Health and Sciences, they showed in a 1998 rapid report, they said that any electrical field over 1 millivolt or at 1 millivolt or higher can open up sodium potassium ion channels and be potentially carcinogenic, right? So this is not a huge electrical field at all. This is very minuscule. And our hearts, our brains, they all conduct electricity at very low potentials. So this is why it's important just to understand and really appreciate how beautiful nature is, that we don't need a lot of, we're that DC battery that's very electrically efficient. We don't need a lot of power, but we also can't take very little power because that's how we operate. But basically, just to give people a background, how did we get into this mess? Well, in the 1970s, there was an oil embargo. And so everybody was racing to get more electrically efficient, right? Energy efficient. So we introduced these things called switch mode power supply, and that cuts up the current. So it can take it from an AC, which is alternating current, to DC, which is more economically efficient. Now, in order to cut up that current, what happens is it goes from a 60 hertz or 60 cycles per second to it could be up to 100,000 hertz, 100,000 times per second of that electrical frequency pulsing. Now, why is that important? Because your heart beats at around 1 hertz or one beat per second on average. Your brain anywhere from 6 to 30 around there, right, on average. So when we're surrounded by this field, that's another thing we're not used to. Okay, so now all these devices, they're plugged in into your neighbor's home. They're going into the electrical system through the earth, through the ground, and potentially in your home. And so when this happened in the 1970s, the electrical companies, what happened was they didn't run neutral wires back from a person's house to the electrical substation. What they did was in North America, they just thrust a lot of ground rods to disperse the current back, right? It's like when lightning strikes the earth, it goes out into a million directions very quick. You basically don't even see it. But that's what's happening. They're not funneling the lightning back to the electrical substation. They're just using the earth, right? They're just like dumping electrical toilet water and everybody's properties. And we're surrounded by this now. And there have been studies showing that childhood leukemia can be influenced by these electrical currents. A lot of EMF consultants talk about magnetic fields. The magnetic field evidence is not as conclusive as electrical field evidence. And this is why dirty electricity, which Samuel Milham, he wrote a book on dirty electricity. Check it out. It's a quick read, but it's a good read. He talks about how all these modern day electronics that are energy efficient are creating this dirty electricity. You can test it out in your own home if you take an AM radio by your walls, and you can hear the distortion if you set that radio to certain frequencies. So with the dirty electricity, there are things we can do. There's filters you can put in, but also, again, testing to see what what fields you're being exposed to. But this is something that, again, getting back to grounding, people don't really think about. When they earth their bed, they may plug it into the wall. Now, your ground, even if it's a true ground, it's still going to have frequencies. Again, they can be very low frequencies that now you're pairing yourself with those frequencies. Your body actually becomes an antenna when you're on the ground. And shielding, EMF shielding, that's also, I would be very, very cautious in using that too, because anytime you're introducing copper or any silver, you're attracting electromagnetic fields to you. And so it's just something that they have pregnancy belts for people that are metal. So you got to be careful. You got to really know what you're doing, because you can do more harm than good. And this is where our strategy is always less is more. We help people reduce what they don't need, and then filter out what you can, and then if you need to shield things, do that. But I like to focus on the dirty electricity because that's something that we can all of us may not have cell phones, but most of us in North America have this dirty electrical current, and it's something that we can all help reduce. And just one more quick thing, solar power, which is talked about as a green alternative, and I think it's great, if it can be done the right way off grid. But these inverters, they generate tons of dirty electricity as well because of that switch mode power supply. Now, if you put solar panels on your house, you got a bad inverter, which generates tons of dirty electricity. You just created a radiation cage on your house, right? So that's another thing to think about. The Starlink satellites, they generate a lot of dirty electricity, those receivers, the cell towers. So, and again, this isn't to scare people. This is to tell you how much this isn't just some little thing. We're surrounded by it, right? And it's controllable if we do it the right way, right? So, especially now when the United States is trying to 10x its solar power input to feed these AI farms, it'd be great if these solar producers could at least use a better inverter that doesn't produce dirty electricity, right? Like, we don't have to do things the hard way. We can do it the right way.
Yeah. S- So, Roman, how would you recommend, let's just say, grounding a bed, or would you at all?
It's a good question. Uh, if you can't measure the ground current, which most of us don't have the tools to do that, I wouldn't do it. If I lived in North America, I would just have a ground. I would just have a bed with a wooden frame, no springs in the mattress, and just less is more. Just turn the power off at night if you can. I know that's not a possibility for a lot of us, with air conditioning, stuff like that. But yeah, I wouldn't. I would, and a lot of EMF consultants too, they'll, what will happen is we'll bring out copper wire and we'll put it in the ground to ground our Ethernet connection or modem. Now you're plugging yourself in to the earth again with the data cable that's going from the earth into your computer and right into your hands. With your bed, some people would take, again, the copper wire and plug it right into the earth. Um, it can be a solution, but you just really need to know what environment you live in, and get that measured. But just to err on the side of caution, right? First, do no harm. I would just get that nice wooden bed frame, maybe a latex wool mattress, and shut the power off if you can. And yeah, put your phones away, shut off the Wi-Fi, all that good stuff. And I would start there.
What about like Magnetico mattresses? You know anything about that? Is that something that you would recommend, or is that going a different direction?
No, that's a great question. And honestly, Logan, I don't have any firsthand experience with Magnetico. I do know a lot of people who have had great results. Rob Metzinger, who runs Safe Living Technologies out of Ontario, they do all kinds of EMF metering products. He's seen clients who actually their pain from cancer and things like that has actually decreased when using that. I know Jack Cruz talks about it. Rick Rubin, I think, uses it. But the Magnetico, in theory, to me, is way better. I would definitely try that first because that's just supporting the DC direct current field of your body to regenerate the right thing along those poles, right? So yeah, I would be a fan of that because it also doesn't have any power to it. You know what I mean? It's just using the magnetic field of your body.
Yeah. Um, they're just so expensive, right? And I think that that's what keeps a lot of people from pulling the trigger and diving into that. So, uh, Roman, you've mentioned cutting off the electricity, and so like I'm trying to process that. Like, got I'm dependent on a fan, right? I've got to have a fan. I've got to have the noise at night. Then we're in the humid South, so an air conditioner is for most people is a necessity at this point. So, processing how would you go? How would a consultant go about getting somebody to the point to where they remove or mitigate as much of the electricity as not at night as possible?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a challenge that we're faced with a lot with people, especially now. Uh, so there's a lot of options you have. What we did in our bedroom, it was a kind of a quick solution, but we shut off the power to our bedroom, but we have a long extension cord. We got ourselves one of these really nice stand-up fans and a kind of, a quiet one that rotates, and we just ran an extension cord. That's a quick solution you can do for your bedroom. It's not going to be as nice as the as the spinning fan, but that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do is figure out what phase your air conditioner is on. So what breaker it's on, because sometimes that air conditioner is not going to be the same breaker as your bedroom. So if you can shut off the electricity to your bedroom, again, now you're cutting off the electrical field that you're surrounded by. And you've killed the copper wire radiation, but you can still have the AC plugged in, and that'll still work. It'll just be on a different circuit. Um, Now, if you can't do any of that, you can get what's called Stetszer filters, and those are filters that are sold online, made in the U.S. by Dave Stetszer and Martin Graham. They created them. I don't know if you ever heard of Stetszer filters. Oh, all right. Okay, great. Yeah. So Dave Stetszer, he trained with the U.S. Air Force Electronics School back in the Vietnam days, in the early '70s. He was there, one of the best electronics schools in the country. His partner, late he passed away, but Dr. Martin Graham, he has over 40 electrical patents to his name, some of which made the invention of the internet possible. So they're not like, they're pretty smart cookies, and they created these UL listed uh, uh, filters, and they'll short out they function as capacitors. So any kind of higher frequency from dirty electricity, they short it out and they normalize the electrical environment. Um, they're not cheap, but depending on the size of your house, they can be. I started with one or two, and then I built from there. But that's something that we also help people with. We'll tell them, we'll help them save money on the electrical filters to see, okay, get a couple, get yourself a meter, and then we'll kind of guide you to see, all right, how you can reduce that dirty electricity field, because the meters or the filters need to be put in certain outlets to maximize their use. But that's something that we did here. Honestly, yeah, it's so the Stetszer filters are also used in other nations, not the U.S., but in Eastern Europe. Kazakhstan actually adopted it as the national standard. So they're what's called a GS unit, or a Gram Stetszer unit. Their buildings are commercial buildings, potentially residences, I'm not sure, but need to are regulated. They have to comply with this guideline of dirty electricity, be under 50 GS units, I think. Dr. Magda Habas out of Trent University in Ontario, she's done a lot of research too. In schools here in Ontario, Willowwood School was one where they put in these filters. They didn't tell the students about it. They didn't even tell the teachers. The teachers knew the experiment was happening, but they didn't know when the filter was going in. And basically, after they put in these filters, symptoms of ADHD, aggressive behavior, lack of concentration, which is brain fog, all went down. The participation in classroom, the mood, everything went up. And it was just from putting in these filters. And why does that happen? Well, we're surrounded by an electrical field normally that's 60 hertz, right? When you have dirty electricity, like I said, that could be 10,000 hertz to 100,000 hertz. Our skin has what's called an impedance, for lack of a better term, a resistance to electricity, measured in ohms. When that normally it's okay, we can resist a 60 hertz field, all right, or a frequency of 60 hertz. Once you introduce dirty electricity now, and you're in that field of 60 hertz, your skin resistance goes from 3,000 ohms to 500 ohms. Now your resistance is reduced by about a factor of 6. What does that mean? That means that these electrical currents from your wall can now penetrate through your skin and pair with your organs, and not in a good way, and just from being in your house, right? So that's why these filters are so important, because again, so many of us are worried about the cell tower or hardwiring, but what are we hardwired into, right? What are we surrounded by? So sorry if I went off on a tangent, but yeah, the Stetszer filters are an amazing resource. And I've done podcasts with Dave Stetszer, and again, the research, it's definitely verified that his filters work. Paul Harding, as I mentioned before, he's had a lot of people also really recover by using these filters. And you may see some stuff online that the filters make it worse when you have wiring errors, but that was based on a study that on this house basically in Hawaii that was wired terribly, and it was a fire hazard. So I would encourage everybody to first measure their electrical fields and get the filters, and then see how you feel, right? If you don't like it, the company's great. They're out of Wisconsin too. You can call them directly. I don't get any credit for it, but you just call them directly, and you could even possibly get a discount over the phone. So yeah, Dave Stetzer's a great guy. I definitely recommend yeah, getting in touch with them if anybody's interested.
Is that something you need an electrician, or is that something you can do yourself?
Very easy. You plug it right in here. I can show you. Yeah, it's basically just like this little filter. You can't really see it, but yeah, you just plug it into the wall, and then this meter. You get this kind of meter here, and you plug that in, and it'll give you a number, and the number should be under 50. So, and you go room by room, and ideally you want it under 25. You could also get yourself a AM radio for $20 and go throughout your house and measure the distortion levels and things like that. But yeah, super easy to use.
Wow, incredible! No, thanks for laying all that out. So I guess next would be what are your thoughts on like lead paint?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I've never used it myself. I know people who do use it to shield. Um, it's it may be better alternative than copper or silver, which are more electrically conductive. But I know Jack Cruz, he used it. But I don't have any firsthand experience with it. It's interesting to me though that they outlawed lead paint, and now and now it's like, well, maybe I should use that lead paint because it'll block a lot of stuff, right? I mean, if they put a lead apron on you when you have a dental X-ray, right? And now the satellites are bombarding us with. So I mean, again, I don't have any firsthand direct experience with it, but yeah, I would be open minded to its use. What do you think about it?
I honestly, I don't know. It's popping up and it makes sense. And anytime the government tells me not to do something, I'm pretty curious about it. It's like the exact opposite is whatever we should be doing. It seems like. So you'd mentioned the cold shower earlier, Roman. Do you incorporate cold thermogenesis, cold therapy within your whether that's your health routine or something that you advise others to do?
Hmm. Uh, I'll answer that, but sorry, just wanted to go back to the lead paint thing. Just a thought popped in my head. Um, with the shielding, you don't want to shield anywhere near your bedroom if you don't have to. So let's say you have a smart meter, right, in your garage or somewhere else. Put the shielding there and then measure it, right? Get yourself a good EMF meter. And we have links on that. But yeah, so with the lead paint example, let's say you get yourself some lead paint and there's an area of the house you want to shield. Try it further away first from your bedroom, right? And then see how that works out. Again, the whole less is more thing, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
that's just
fair.
something I wanted to say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, with the cold exposure, I got to thank Wim Hof for that. Of course, he was a big inspiration. And then what Jack Cruz talks about, how our bodies release ultraviolet light when we're exposed to cold. I never knew that, but that makes sense with the Himalayan mountains, and these landscapes that are very very high in UV. It's almost like nature's clue, right? So, no, I mean I do it every day. There's a lot of studies that say that it increases testosterone. What I've seen is that the studies say that it reduces cortisol, so in that way it balances out your testosterone and everything else. But from what I'm aware of, it increases your dopamine by 250%, which is huge. I took a cold shower right before our interview, and it's great. It's the best way to start the day, and it doesn't have to be long. It's 30 seconds, 60, or 90 seconds, whatever you want to do, but it's a great way to stimulate our vagus nerve, which helps us relax. I know if I give a good burp when I come out of the shower, I know I did my job. And yeah, in this day and age, I kind of look at it like there's a book about it's called Eaters of the Dead. This book, but it's about the Vikings and this horde of invading tribe that comes in, right? And they have what's called this glowworm, right? They basically have a fireball that they use to try to kill the Vikings. And what the Vikings did was they doused their shields, they doused themselves in cold water. They were constantly surrounding themselves with this cold water, and it's a myth, but by using this cold water, they're able to then quench the dragon, right? And I think it's funny because we look at the electromagnetic fields we're surrounded by, which is that dragon, that invisible dragon. So just reducing the cold, our temperature, our inflammation is going to do so much, especially when we're chronically exposed to all these artificial toxins from the air, from our phones and everything else. Just doing that, little things each day like that definitely help and build up.
I think the cold therapy has been one of the best things that I've ever done. Now I hate it. Don't get me wrong. Like getting in there, I'm like, this is absolutely miserable. But like afterwards, I've never regretted it. Right? Tom Seeger's a buddy. His Maraska Forge, and just it it seems to me the more EMF toxic that we are, the more we probably need the cold thermogenesis and sun, right? And you've laid out some very interesting concepts for me on just kind of how toxic that environment is, even when we think we're doing good. So it makes me kind of reemphasize how important cold may be.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the more you can be proactive in your health, whether it's farming great, nutritious food, like, or having that cold exposure, the better off you're going to be, from not becoming electromagnetically poisoned or electromagnetically sensitive. Because a lot of people will become sensitive. We're all sensitive, but a lot of people become hypersensitive. They've usually had some kind of thing that happened to them, like Arthur Furstenberg, colleague of mine who recently passed away. He had a lot of dental X-rays done to him with no apron, very early on in his age, and like I think he was in college in his 20s. A lot of people, they work in the audio industry, or they may be buy a bank of smart meters, or they may buy themselves a shielding tent from a disreputable source, and then they become toxified, and now they're sensitive to everything. It's kind of like if you drank commercial milk all your life that's laden with whatever, right, chemicals and stuff, or antibiotics, whatever. Eventually, even when you have the healthy milk, now you can't have that, right, because your body just becomes saturated. So my point is, yeah, be proactive like you're doing, right? Have that cold exposure every day, meditation, prayer, whatever works for you. Don't get overwhelmed. Just overwhelm yourself with solutions, and then you'll be okay.
Recently had Mitch, the organ donor, on, and it was fascinating. He's big into Wilhelm Reich's work, and I'll be honest, I don't understand it at all. I just think it's fascinating. And I've got one of his little pyramids and some of the cloud busting things he's got. And honestly, like played with the little cheap EMF meters and stuff, and it absolutely did something. It reduced it. I again don't understand it. And something else I've noticed on these chemtrails and stuff, because I'm in Little Rock, so I'm right by Little Rock Air Force Base, and then Clinton Airport. Like within 6 miles on both sides. This is two, in military and a big time airport. So we've got chemtrails stuff at just nonstop. It's unbelievable. And right over where I've got these little, it's a copper tube, right, and it's filled with that black resin and whatever else that he does with it, this organ, and it is, you can see break up directly above where we are of these trails. And I sent him a video the other day. I was like, dude, I don't understand it, but it's doing something. My point of going through all that was just like, is that something that's even ever been on your radar? Reich's work. How does one even rationalize some of these things? Because it seems so foreign. It's a wonderful interview. Mitch did a great job explaining how he got to that point, but like, it's still it's still hard for me to grasp, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, and that's a great question. And honestly, I think if you see it work, that's great. There are a lot of people, and I don't know Mitch personally. I did check him out really quick on your podcast, and he seems like very reputable. But the problem is, it's like that one bad apple, right? There's a lot of disreputable people when it comes to this thing,
Guaranteed.
right? And they'll sell you anything. And I honestly, I don't know how it works. I would venture to say that it probably has something to do with the magnetic field, which is like your intention field. Wilhelm Reich did have some positive results. The magnetic field aspect is a little bit more elusive than electric fields. I just like to know what, if I can measure something, then great. If you took that EMF meter to those things, you notice a difference, fantastic. I'm not going to say don't get those things. I think the problem with some of these, maybe not that, what Mitch has, but the other stuff like dependence and things like this, it can give us a false sense of security, like cell phone stickers, right? Just put a little sticker on your cell phone. Oh, you're protected. Even if you're protected, well, what about the bees, right? What about your wife sitting across from you at the dinner table, right? Like, so I think sometimes you can get a false sense of security. However, if you see it working, I'm all for it. I think the great thing about it is that it's raising awareness for this whole debacle we're in right now. I have, there's one guy I forget his name, but he would even do a kind of like a dance. He would meditate before, and then he would spin. So kind of like think about that vortex, those orgone energy fields are creating, and he would then push the chemtrails out just by creating this intention field. And I know it sounds nuts, but he showed me videos. He did it himself just by focusing his intention, and it took a lot of energy out of him to do that. So I think, I believe in a higher power. There's something out there, and I think it's all connected somehow. And who am I to say that those things are wrong, right? I just like to know, I would say, hey, if you get it, any of your listeners, get a meter, right? See how you feel, just like anything else, just like the dirty electricity filters, right? But I think it's great. Hey, just tap into your body and your intuition more.
I think there's just so much that we don't understand for one thing, and the more that I learn, the more I'm amazed with God's design and how everything is put together, and I don't think we're ever going to figure it out. Again, I think the solutions are pretty easy, right? I think the biggest problem that most of us are going to have is when we decide to live in a metropolitan area. That's just where basically everybody that I know that has a cancer situation, the more of a metropolitan area they are in, the worse of the outcome. That's got so many in L.A., Houston, it's Chicago, right? Like it's not going good for them. And my advice is always get out of the city. Right, just you got to get out, and like Jack will say, go to Central America, get in the sun on a beach. And so I think there's a lot to that, and I think that kind of the conversation we're having is really for those that need to justify living in more of a populated area because we have less of these problems. All right, there's going to be. You pointed out the Arizona aspect. There's probably a military base or something out there too in the middle of nowhere that we don't know about. So there's other variables, right? But for the most part, the more connected you are with nature, the less that you need all the things that we're having a conversation at. I would think.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I always tell people, remove what you can at the root of it, right? And with cancer treatment, right? A lot of successes, don't eat this, don't eat that, eat less, fast, and having those digital fasts or removing any devices we don't need. We've had people. I've helped one guy. He discovered he had over 30 devices in his home. He didn't know that, right? So just like taking those little steps and removing everything can be huge. And then if you want to add any of those, other things like harmonizing and things like that. But I'm about removing it at the source. Like if we can get rid of those planes that are spraying us, let's do that first, right? Um, and hopefully it doesn't come to that, but it may. And I think it's just, yeah, I guess the best thing you can do, to your point, is you know get into nature because it's almost free. My wife and I, we go camping multiple times a year, and we leave our cell phone either in the car locked away in a box for a week, um, or don't bring it at all last time. And yeah, we have maps, we go out, and that is the best selling point, I think, for somebody in the city, is not to say don't use your cell phones as like taking away a toy. Get out in nature for a day, right, and see how you feel. Don't bring the phone. You get out in nature in a day, and then people will eventually see how beautiful life really is. And yeah, so that's fantastic advice.
I mean, love that. Well, Roman, where do we send people that want to follow up, visit with you, maybe work directly with you, get a hold of your resources? Where do they need to go?
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me, Logan. Really appreciate this opportunity. Everybody can go to thepowercouple.ca. I also have a Substack. We do a weekly newsletter and a podcast, and that's romanshapoval.substack.com. But you'll have that access to the Substack when you go to our website, thepowercouple.ca. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you. Roman at thepowercouple.ca. Thanks so much,
Right.
Logan.
Man, thank you. I really appreciate it and look forward to continuing the conversation. It's a big one. I don't think it's going anywhere soon.
Yeah. No.